thanks everyone for coming to our session about Google TV. My name is Kurzke. I am a developer advocate with the Google TV team for the Android platform. You can find me online either on Google Plus with my name or under profile/Kurzke, or you can subscribe to our Twitter feed at Google TV Dev. So what are we going to talk about today? First, I want to give a very brief overview of why television is interesting for developers. Then I'll talk a little bit more about what Google TV is and how to develop for Google TV. And lastly, in case you haven't been here for the previous session about market, I'll talk a little bit about market. I'll probably skip over some that Rich just said. And I'll explain what is specific to Google TV for market. So let's get started. I'm not going to bore you too much since we're already running late with the statistics. I think what's important to take home is people watch a lot of television. People have a lot of televisions in their house. The average, and this is America, the average American household has 2.5 people and has 2.8 televisions. So they have more TVs than they have people. And they watch an average of 5 hours. And I say watch because the TV is on, they may not be sitting in front of it. And then what we can say is today over 20% of all TVs are sold with some form of internet connection. And we expect that by 2014, the smart TV sales are reaching 123 million. It's pretty hard to sell a television set today which doesn't at least have some online capability. So in summary, a lot of people watch a lot of television and TVs are getting smarter. The way I see it is we are with televisions where telephones were in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we made the step from a feature phone to a smartphone. And we as developers can help make a better use of this time and of this device. Why Google Television? Well, we believe that we can make the TV experience better. We can connect TVs to the web and ultimately bring applications to the TV. So we want to create the platform that you as developers can create applications for. You should care because the television is usually the center of the family room, it's the center of the house. People spend a lot of time watching it. What I actually like more is I like to think of the other 19 hours that people are not watching television. People have a habit, they want to watch television in the evening, but think about what you can do with the TV set in the morning. Maybe show them the latest breaking news, traffic updates. Hey, there's a traffic jam on your way to work, you might want to take a different route. So there's a lot of really cool applications that we haven't even thought about yet that you can create on this device. So what's Google TV? As of 2 weeks ago, Google TV is now Honeycomb. So we're pretty excited. We have a version of Honeycomb running on Google TV out in the lobby. You can come check it out. It's an optimized version of Honeycomb, but for developers, it's pretty much the standard 3.1 development environment. The devices available today, which run Google TV, is a line of televisions from Sony, and also the Sony Blu-ray players come directly integrated with Google TV. You can just plug them into your living room. And Logitech has a standalone box which has HDMI in and HDMI out and overlays Google TV. What does it look like? In case you haven't seen our demo out there, this is what Google TV looks like to a user. To you it may look familiar if you have seen a Honeycomb tablet. It's the familiar black background, blue highlights. We also have a launcher bar in the bottom, which is a little bit more resembling the ice cream sandwich UI. So it's basically Honeycomb optimized for television. And what you see on top here is you actually see home screen widgets. So you notice that there is widgets on this home screen that you as a developer can create. If this was connected to a real television, there would actually be live TV. It would be overlaid with an alpha blend, but there would be live TV playing in the background. So this is what a TV viewer would see when they press the home button. And what I think is pretty cool is if you manage to get your app in the bottom launcher bar, or if you have a widget that the user thinks is valuable enough to be installed on the home screen, your app will be visible every time they interact with the television. Think about it. Every time they change channel, every time they do anything on the TV, they'll see your logo, they'll see your app, they have a chance to engage with your application. The other thing that you see here is we have a notification mechanism. If you use the Android notification APIs, you can surface notifications to the user. That could be things like, hey, you have a new email, might want to check it. Could be things like your favorite show is coming up. So you can use your imagination. The other feature is integrated search. The Google TV remote control has a search key. We want to make it easy for TV viewers to quickly get to what they want to watch. The users can press the search key, they can enter a search query, they will find web results, they will find TV optimized results, and as a developer, you can provide results using the regular Android search providers. So again, as a developer, I think this is pretty exciting to get your results in front of the TV viewer. Every time somebody looks for a favorite show or they look for a product, you can surface your search results. Of course, if you surface too much unrelated queries, the users will get tired and they will uninstall it. So just to highlight, this is an opt-in, so the user have to configure that they actually want to get search results from your app. The other thing that's new in Google TV, and Google TV has been around for a year, we had more of a closed system with Eclair as an operating system. So now that we updated to Honeycomb and we have done all of our homework and it's a compatible Android device, now we also have Android Market on Google TV. This is the primary mechanism how you as a developer will distribute applications to users. So in the Android Market, you may have seen in the previous presentation, we have the feature graphic. So we typically highlight anywhere from 5 to 7 featured applications. And then we have some highlighted applications here, which are our editorial staff picks. And again, as a developer, making it to this list is pretty cool. Every time somebody opens up the market, they'll see your app. If you have a website, you can actually let us know on our Google TV, it's com.google.com/TV website. If you come and let us know about your optimized for TV website, some of our content guys can take a look at it. And we like to promote new and exciting web experiences into Spotlight, which is one of the applications. A user can find your website and you can promote the optimized experience. So what's really different about TV? As a developer, you have to put yourself in the mindset of the TV viewer, and we call this the 10-foot experience. Or actually, for this audience, it's the 3.5 meter experience, or 3.05 meter experience. So this is what televisions used to look like. We have come quite a long way. This used to be the user interface of a television. Somebody had to get off the couch, walk up to the TV, push a button, and sit back down. I'm really happy we have remote controls now. The days where you had to get off your couch to walk up to the TV to change channel are hopefully over. And the days also are over where you have to get off the couch and touch a touch screen. So unless you have little kids in your house, the TV is not a touch screen. Keep that in mind. Unfortunately, since Angry Birds, kids just think that every screen is always a touch screen. So Usually your users will use a controller like a remote control to interact with the Google television. And so those are the two existing remotes right now, the Logitech and the Sony remote. And of those remotes, definitely the most used button is this 5-way navigation control, which is up, down, left, right, and select. We also have hard keys for media controls, play, pause, rewind, forward. So as an application developer, you can use those key codes to do whatever you want. Start a slideshow, start a playback. We have an application for Android and iPhones which allows you to use a cell phone to control your Google TV. And we also open sourced, by the way, the protocol for this. So if you have a much better idea and you think you can create a TV remote control with 4 buttons, then by all means use the protocol, create a really cool new user interface for TV remote. One of the exciting TV opportunities is creating applications across multiple devices. More and more people have tablets at home. Everybody has a smartphone, and I hope it's an Android smartphone. So with that, you have one platform, you have Android running on a small screen, on a tablet, and on a large screen. As a developer, this means you can create some really cool applications that run across all 3 screens. The types of applications that are possible is either you can have universal applications that run on all devices, phones, tablets, and TVs. You can have companion apps which work together, and you could imagine something like your tablet application shows you your personalized content and the TV application shows the shared content. Examples would be we're demoing a little poker game where your poker cards are on your tablet or your phone, and the shared game space is on television. Or you can have specialized Google TV only apps. One thing about television is it's unlike a mobile phone, it's a social device. Your mobile phone is probably very personal. Actually, honestly, if my wife takes my mobile phone away and starts browsing my email, I usually get nervous. So keep in mind with a television set, people use it when you're not at home, you have friends over, people use it just as a shared device. As a developer, think about how this affects your users. If you create something like a Twitter client or a social media client, you may want to have maybe a pin functionality or some quick way for somebody to block and unblock personal content on the television. Maybe consider easy account switching or multiple accounts. Question? Sorry, it's really hard to hear the question. Okay, so the question was, is there easy support for multiple accounts on Google Television logged in at the same time, or easy account switching? So we use the Android account manager, and you can configure the Android account manager. Unfortunately, there is no easy switching of personalities or switching of accounts. So this would have to be implemented by applications themselves. So if you, for example, have a slideshow application, you could imagine maybe having an easy way to switch between your wife's slides, your slides, maybe the kids' slides. This is one of the areas that we're constantly evolving, but as of today, you basically have the standard Android account manager. So now that we know the opportunity and we know the platform, let's see how can we go about and develop for Google TV. Honestly, one of the biggest differences and one of the biggest challenges that I see, so I've been working for the last year now with developers who have created applications for Google TV, and user interface design and general UI design is by far one of the biggest topics for television. People have very high expectation. They are used to seeing very polished content on your TV, And it's very important that your app looks good. What I show here is, I think the density of information on your screen on a television should also be lower than on a tablet. If you have a tablet app and you have a lot of text in your app and you show a lot of information, you may want to scale that back a little bit. People don't want to have a full-blown desktop on their TV. If it looks like something out of their work, then it stops being fun and it starts being work. So, in general, we recommend for the UI design, focus on what's really important for your application and what's really important for your use case. Don't clutter up the user interface. Group together things that are logically combined. Also think about basically highlighting elements on the screen which are most likely to be used. Throw out stuff that's not really relevant. Keep it simple. Use dynamic layouts, scalable assets. My favorite topic is really use 9-patch images. I'll show later in a bit. Screen size really increases the memory that you need for your images. And consider hiring a UI designer. I'm clearly not a UI designer. Most developers are not. In fact, this slide is a horrible design. If your app looks like this, you're not going to make it in the market. So here is an example. Use dark background. Nobody wants a white screen in their living room. You're usually watching TV in a, I want to say, fairly dark or muted light environment. Use bold fonts, use short lines, increased line spacing. Don't use too many too long words. People don't like that in their living room. So use gratuitous effects. So the other thing to keep in mind for design, and honestly, I should have maybe consulted with a UI designer local here, but my advice for UI designers in the US is build your screen left to right. Have a global navigation, have a contextual navigation, and have detail information. That's typically a good design pattern. Keep in mind your TV is a very wide screen device. The last thing you really want is a list view that spans the entire width of your screen. So you can imagine to split your TV in different zones, and you may have seen a similar slide earlier in the UI presentation. Organizing your application in zones also allows you to reuse a lot of content with tablets and phones. You can use UI fragments. Android gives you a lot of different mechanisms to organize your UI in modular blocks, and you can use XML layouts for TV. Here is an example of a good layout. Actually, let me contrast this with an undesirable TV layout first. So this could be a tablet application. Imagine you have a list of all your friends here, maybe all your people you're connected with on Google+. You can select your friends, maybe your coworkers, your family, and you can, say, send an email or send them a text. Perfectly fine tablet application. You would scroll through your list of friends, you swipe through it, you select one or two, and then you go to the buttons. Now imagine navigating this with a 5-way navigation. You would start with, in this example, selecting one of the top tabs, and then you would scroll down, and in order to get to the buttons, you have to scroll all the way to the end of your list. If you have a lot of friends, this takes a lot of keystrokes. So navigating this on a D-pad or on a 5-way navigation is not a good experience. So what makes this different? You still have a list view in the middle. The user, if they want to scroll through your list of friends, they can still scroll through, but now they can use the left and the right key to go to either the tabs or they can go to the actions on the right side. So this is a much better layout, and as a developer, you can actually use the same layout on a tablet as well. So what I found is if you implement an application and you keep the 5-way navigation in mind from the beginning in your design stage, you can frequently get to a really useful and usable layout on both TV screen and tablets. So here's an example. This is a Panoramio. It's a simple image viewer that we implemented, and it uses the left side navigation. What I want to highlight is this left side navigation. It actually is a component that we open sourced. It's available on our website. You can either, I'll show the URL later. You can find it very easily on our, it's code.google.com/tv site. The left side navigation bar, it has the same API as the action bar, so you could create one application that uses the action bar on a Honeycomb tablet, and it uses the left side navigation on a TV application. The other design element is actually sound. So a lot of developers use haptic feedback, things like the vibrate mode on a tablet or on a phone to indicate things like you have a key press or you selected something. You don't have that option on a television, but you have sound. And a lot of the really polished applications use sound as a feedback mechanism on television. Just be careful to default to a reasonably low volume. People usually have their TVs connected to a pretty powerful speaker system and use sounds that are appropriate for a living room environment. There's a couple apps that I wouldn't want to run in my living room. So the other big thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the touch screen navigation versus the D-pad navigation. If you navigate a screen like this on a touch screen, you don't need to indicate, for example, what is currently active selected. If you navigate it with a five-way navigation, you have to indicate which of those elements is currently highlighted. So one of the things you should highlight is what is currently selected and where is my keyboard focus. So the keyboard focus is indicated in this red square here. This is probably not a very good UI. You should make it a little bit more obvious. When a user has to look for where the focus is, it sometimes gets confusing. So when you create or when you override the default UI resources or you define your own UI resources, keep in mind that for a tablet application, most of the time people forget to define the focused, or especially the focused is frequently forgotten. Selected, you sometimes think about it if you need it. One that is forgotten almost every single time is the selected and focused at the same time. So imagine if you move your focus over one of the elements in the list that is currently selected, you need to indicate both it's selected and it's focused. And users get confused very quickly when the focus sort of disappears and they don't know where it is anymore. So again, it's no new APIs. It has been around in Android. When you define your selector items, just make sure you have the proper combination of all of the focused and selected. The other thing to keep in mind is provide short paths through your user interface, provide logical paths, how to navigate from one element to another element. So here is, just to highlight, here is the focusable elements on this page, and you see there is a grid in the middle and then there's a list on the side. And one of the challenges is, for example, Android, if you don't do anything and you just have a grid view and a list view, Android will make some default assumptions where the focus will move to. So if the focus right now is on the little star here and the user presses the down key, the question is, where does the focus go from here? And we have a few options. The focus could go to the next element right below it. And I argue that is most likely what the user wanted to achieve. The focus could also go over to the side to this cell because that's the next cell right below it. And most likely this could be an outcome if Android does the default focus handling. Or it could go to the beginning of the next row if this is, for example, two different UI containers, you just change to the next UI container and you go all the way to the side. So those are the options that, depending on how you structured your layout, you could have. And if you want to achieve what the user was expecting, then you may have to override the default focus behavior. Whenever you navigate an application, keep in mind users like sort of the element of least surprise. When they press a down key, they don't want to have to go find where did my focus go. It should be predictable. Again, people always keep asking me, what is all the new APIs for Google TV? And I have to disappoint you, there is really very little new APIs. It's the existing old APIs. You just have to keep in mind to use them for television. So for Android, you have the focus down, focus up, right, left, and tab. One other thing to keep in mind is what's the screen size. Televisions are very large screens, and most of you probably thought they are larger than a tablet, but in this graphic you'll see that the Zoom tablet, it's actually classified as an extra large screen, where the television sets are a large screen with either high resolution or extra high resolution. The reason for this is you sit further away from a TV screen, and you can try this out at home. Just take your tablet, hold it up at whatever it is, 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters, foot or two, and watch. It is actually bigger than your television, which is across the room. Now, with this said, let's look at the memory consumption. If I look at the good old G1 as a reference point, a full screen image was about 0.5 megabyte. And a full screen image is, for example, a nicely rendered background for your application. I find that a lot of times applications look much better when they're not just on a black background or on a solid color background, but maybe you have a little gradient or something interesting in the background. Well, on a G1 that costs you about 0.5 megabyte. On a Nexus 1 or a Nexus S, it costs you about 1.5 megabytes. That's still okay. On a tablet, a full screen background is 4 megabytes. Well, that's something you start thinking about. On television, a full screen background is 8 megabytes in size. If you have 8 megabytes of background image, that's a lot of downloads for one. It goes off your heap size. And I'll show you in a second that it's actually sometimes even worse. You may spend 16 megabytes. So the other thing I want to remind you is not too far along, not too far ago, in a universe not too far away, the televisions used to look like something like this here. What you'll notice is the televisions originally had sort of areas that you couldn't quite see, and the image probably didn't look so good. So people came up with a concept called Overscan. And I'm really sad to inform you that this concept still is with us. And yes, televisions come in HD, high resolution, and if you look it up in Wikipedia, it says 1920 by 1080 pixels per screen. But there is pixels on your screen that are not visible. That can be because of manufacturing tolerances. This can be because the panel didn't come in quite those resolutions, or various other marketing or technical reasons. So if you have, and your designers, for example, give you a full screen 1920 by 1080 image with your application layout, it's possible that the user only sees 5 or 10% less than this image because of the overscan on the side. So keep in mind, not all the pixels are visible on the screen. And what's actually even worse than this, if you create this application here, the user will not just see this frame or not just miss this frame. You could just compensate for this by having empty rows on the side. The user will actually see this. And I just want to point out the upper left corner is fully visible, but then you're missing twice the overscan here and here. And okay. So yeah, so this is what the user will see. So you have to scale your application. The good news is whenever you set up a Google TV device, when you connect your Blu-ray player the first time, we calibrate for the visible area. And as a developer, at runtime, you know how many pixels are visible. But it's different for each device. So at development time, you don't exactly know how many pixels you have at runtime. The good news is Android has a lot of layout mechanisms for this. Android adapts dynamically to screen sizes. So if you use the layout mechanisms properly, it will actually scale and stretch the layout properly. So that's another reason to leave some white space in your screen design. So just very quickly, I know we started a little bit late. I'm trying to summarize the slides here. When you develop Android applications, keep in mind the sound focus APIs. A lot of Google TV applications will have multimedia, will have sound, will play back sound in the background. If you handle the sound focus properly, this means that if, for example, your application is in background and the user switches to live television, your application sound will mute, or when you watch live TV and your app comes up, when you request sound focus, then your app will receive the sound focus. So make sure you implement the proper audio focus change listener and you use the sound manager or the audio manager to request focus. The other API that you have, which comes in handy, is even though the television does not have GPS, when you set up the device, you enter your postal code or your zip code, and in your application, you can retrieve the geolocation of the zip code from the location manager. So there is a static location provider that you can request, and with the proper permission, so your app needs to have the permission to access course location, you can get the zip code. So this gives you enough information to show local news, local weather, local TV information, so you know where the user is. The API which is unique to Google TV is actually the channel lineup. So as a developer at runtime, you can figure out which channels are available on a set-top box. And we implemented this simply as a content provider. So the content provider gives you a number of fields, and you can get, for example, the channel name, the call sign, we get a channel number, and a URI. What's interesting is if you take this URI and you create an intent with that URI, you can actually change to that channel. So that allows your application to switch what the TV is currently tuned to. And again, it's not really a new API, quote unquote, it's just using intents and content providers in the context of Google TV. So with that, how can you get started? So if you want to get started developing for Google TV today, it's a Honeycomb device. Basically you can use a regular Honeycomb pad. You can pair it with a Bluetooth keyboard, and you can test all the navigation, all the focus handling, and you can try out how to navigate your application with just keyboard inputs. If you want to go a step further, you can use the emulator, which unfortunately for now is only available on Linux desktops. But it's a regular SDK add-on. You can just download it with the regular Android SDK manager. And this allows you to test for screen sizes, and it also allows you to test for overscan. When you create AVD devices, you can set the amount of overscan, and it allows you to test out how your application works. And lastly, I think everyone who wants to distribute an application in the market should get a real device. If you get to the point where you want to ship it in the market, try it out on a Logitech or a Sony Blu-ray device. Some of the things to keep in mind for developers, Google TV does not have native code access, so no NDK, no JNI. Unlike a cell phone, we also have a full Chrome browser with full flash. So as an Android developer, you can choose between a web view and a Chrome browser. And one of the things that I want to just highlight is don't make the assumption that the only broadband is Wi-Fi. I have seen a lot of apps which, if they don't have Wi-Fi, they assume they don't have broadband, and then they don't display high-resolution content. So when you query the connection manager, yeah, just be smart. So distributing your app, I've shown you the market, you want to be there. Here's a list of features. You can also find those online. This is a subset of the regular features. The one that I want to point out is the com.google.android TV. And if you want your application, if you've tested it, you want to show up in market, you have to set the uses feature Android hardware touchscreen to false. This is the flag by which we right now identify if your application is shown in the market on Google TV. So after you have tested your app, you set this feature, you upload to market, your app will show up on Google TV. Keep in mind, if you do that, your app will still show up on mobile devices. So in this case, it will show up on both touchscreen and non-touchscreen devices. If you want to have different applications, you could, for example, enable the touchscreen equals false, and then you could at runtime check for the, at runtime use the package manager and check for whether you run on an Android TV device. Or if you want to only show up on Google TV and you don't want to show up in market for regular mobile devices, you can indicate that you use the feature com.google.android TV equals true. So with that, you can do all three permutations. You can have one application across all platforms. You can have one application which shows up only on TV, or one application only for mobile. When you or if you create multiple applications for mobile and for TV, keep in mind to either change your package name, that would be my recommendation, or you can experiment with the multiple APK support in market. I think the easiest way that I've found is just change your package name. One caveat to remind you of is, when you use permissions, keep in mind that permissions sometimes imply features. So if you ask for a camera permission, it implies the camera feature, and it will also exclude your application from Google TV, since we don't support cameras or some of the other features. Lastly, when you're done creating your application, use AAPT dump badging, sort of to verify your APK. This will give you a good list of features that are available. So make sure you test your app. Make sure you test performance. Performance is really key to a good experience on television. So once you upload to the market, make sure you have a feature graphic and let us know about it. So if you want, come by later at the Google TV booth. We give out little business cards, and come let us know about it. Okay, I've been told that time is over, so find us here. And I'll be available for questions right outside. Let's get the next speaker on stage.